Hi everyone, welcome back to the Art of Business English. This is episode 78, I believe, and today I'll be basically looking at the second part of my little two-part series on common mistakes that people make in English. So I hope you've all listened to last week's episode, which was well received. I looked at the first 15 of the 30 common mistakes. And I've just finished putting the finishing touches on my second series or second part. So basically I'm going to be looking at those today. Okay, so we're going to look at the last 15 common mistakes that people make in English. Now, the first one is with the verb arrive. Okay, so arrive is llegar, no? Or llegar. So basically what happens is people often say arrive to. Now, why do people use this? Well, probably because in Spanish it is llegar a, so people assume that the preposition after arrive is to. However, we can only put two prepositions after arrive. We can put arrive at or arrive in. And remember, we arrive in a city and we arrive at a place. Okay, so don't ever put to. It's not correct. Okay, it's only in or at. Let's look at the second one, which is who or which. Now, these are relative pronouns, and the common mistake is that people are confusing which and who in oral conversation normally. So remember, which is only for things. Okay, so you can't use it for people. And who is for people. What is also a common mistake is that people always use that. That for everything. That, care. Okay? So try and avoid using that. When you want to talk about things, use which. And when you want to talk about people, you can use who. Okay? Don't confuse them. All right? All right, the next one is the interrogate. Oh, this is a really annoying habit. Bad mistake. All right, with interrogative pronouns, so when we talk about interrogative pronouns and auxiliary verbs, or what I'm actually talking about is when we form questions, so what, when, where, okay, these interrogative pronouns, what people actually do is they forget to add the auxiliary verb in questions. It's very annoying. People also do it normally as well. They say, you go to the party, okay, instead of did you go to the party. But it happens more, basic speakers forget, to use the auxiliary in questions. Well, obviously, because in Spanish, you just go, fuiste a la fiesta, in the question form. And in the affirmative form, you would also say, fuiste a la fiesta. So the thing is, we need the auxiliary verbs in questions. So basic speakers of English usually forget that. They say, you go to the party. Whereas when you become a little bit more advanced, even more advanced students, when they start forming questions with interrogative pronouns, what, when, where, how, why, they also forget to put in the pronoun, or the auxiliary, sorry. They say, what you do last weekend, instead of what did you do last weekend, okay? Why you arrived so late, instead of why did you arrive so late, okay? So, for me, after 10 years of teaching, I still can't understand why people forget to put in do, does, or did, okay? Especially because you've been learning it since you were so young and from basic levels. So try not to forget the auxiliary. Remember, in English, we need an auxiliary verb, do, does, or did in questions. Just, like in English, we don't have the interrogative pronoun, the interrogative symbol that's upside down. You know how you have a question mark at the beginning, or an upside down question mark at the beginning of a question in Spanish, and you also have an upside down question, when you have a normal question mark at the end of a sentence in English. Well, just think of that. The upside down question mark is the do, the does, or the did, okay? All right, let's look at the next one, which is expressing purpose with to. Now, in English, we use the infinitive to express purpose, okay? And what people often do is translate it literally. So they say, I'm listening to this podcast to improve my English. And why do we do that? Or another one is, I'm listening to this podcast for improving my English. Now, this is a very common mistake and it's also quite annoying. Why does this happen? Well, it's because in Spanish you express purpose using para, okay? Para poder, para hacer, tal, tal, tal. So in English, you cannot put for in front of an infinitive. You can't put for to run or for to go. Okay? It's impossible. Don't do it. The only time we use for to express purpose in English is when we're talking about the use of something. So, for plus a gerund is when we talk about the use of an object. So, for example, let me think. Here's an example. This remote, el mando, no? This remote is for turning on the TV. So it's for turning on because I'm using the remote. I'm talking about the remote's use. Its purpose is for turning on the TV. But if you're just talking normally about your intentions, then you would just say to, okay? I am saving money to buy a new car, okay? Estoy ahorrando dinero para comprar un nuevo coche. But in English, we don't say para, we say to, okay? Just think infinitive. All right, the next one is using to after must or can. Now, this is quite a basic mistake. And, you need to unlearn this very quickly if you make it. It's very annoying to a native person. I can to come to your party. That is wrong, okay? Why? Well, must and can are very special modal verbs. Well, they're special verbs and they're called modals. And they're actually very special because they are not really expressed in an infinitive way with to. You can't say to must or to can. Like all verbs in English are expressed in the infinitive form with to. So, for example, to run, to go, to swim. Must and can are special. They're the only two verbs that do not have a to infinitive delante and do not have a to después. Okay, so the verb that follows must or can is without to. It's called a bare infinitive. A bare infinitive is simply the verb without to. Okay? So, you would say, I can come to your party, not I can to. Okay? I can come to your party. Okay? Very simple. But often, this is a common mistake. All right, next one. Not using ing after specific verbs. Now, this is a little bit more advanced. I mean, you need to learn these when you become more of a proficient or, capable speaker. For example, I avoided to walk near the dangerous machine. Now, unfortunately, with these, there is no rule. It's just like that, okay? So, I enjoy to talk to her. These are wrong. You can't say, I avoided to walk, and you can't say I enjoyed to talk because the verbs avoid and enjoy are followed by gerund. So this happens because some verbs in English require an ing form in the next verb after them, okay? It's as simple as that. And these must be learnt. There's not really like a grammatical rule. It's like that. It's así, okay? Porque sí. All right, so an example, I avoided walking near the dangerous machine, or I enjoy talking to her. Okay, so those are correct with the verb in ing. They're not correct if you put the infinitive. So you need to learn those because they really help your fluency. People will understand you, but it sounds a bit wrong. Okay, the next one, and this is quite annoying because this can really be something that you learn incorrectly when you're young, and then it can take you a long time to fix. So, misusing the Saxon genitive. All right, it is the birthday of my brother. Okay, so that's not right. All right, why? In Spanish, we say es el cumpleaños de mi hermano. Now, most students just do the literal translation and they forget all the rules. Okay, we have rules with the Saxon genitive, the possessive. It's called the possessive case. We need to use an apostrophe S when we're talking about the possessives. And the possessives include people, animals, institutions or companies, and time expressions. Don't forget your time expressions. For example, next week's meeting is important. Not the meeting of next week. Okay? Next week's meeting is important. You really need to use that s. Okay? It's my brother's birthday. Okay? So super important that you introduce the s. Okay? This of de mi hermano. This of, just think of it as apostrophe s. Okay? When you're talking about people, animals, companies, institutions, or time expressions. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is forgetting subjects. This is a quite basic mistake, and people should not do it. But I see it a lot, okay? You always forget it. Well, not always. It is often a problem when it is the third person, okay? Is a beautiful day today. Okay, so why does this happen? Because all sentences need a subject in English. However, in Spanish, the verb conjugation indicates the subject. Yo tengo. Okay, tengo is yo. You don't need to say yo. You just say tengo dos coches. It's not necessary to say yo tengo dos coches. Él tiene dos coches. Tiene dos coches. So the problem is that because in Spanish the verbs indicate the subject when they are conjugated, people then forget to put them, especially when they use the verb is. So he is, she is, or it is. Okay. Don't forget the subjects. We need subjects in English. It is a beautiful day, not is a beautiful day. In English, if we don't indicate a subject, it's completely confusing. All right? Because the verbs don't really change, do they? If I say I walk, you walk, he walks, there's a small change there in the third person. But the verb pretty much is the same for all subjects. If I say walk to the shop, who walked to the shop? Yeah, you walk to the shop? Thank you. Okay, so we need a subject. Don't forget those. All right, let's look at the next one. Confusing possessive pronouns. Common mistake. How is John's dad? Your father is good. Why? I don't understand why. Many Spanish speakers use your when in fact they mean his or her. I don't understand why this happens. It's a mystery to me. Okay, so it's very confusing to someone if you're trying to use these possessive pronouns and you say your when you mean his or her. I could understand the getting confused between his or her because su y su is the same for male and female in Spanish. However, tú is not su. Tú is you or your. Okay, so, you know, it's a little bit of a mystery to me. So try and be careful and precise when using the possessive pronouns because you can really confuse someone. Because if you say your, they'll be like, what? You're talking about my brother? But I was talking about his brother. Okay? So try not to confuse those. Just requires a bit of thinking. Okay, let's look at this example. How is John's dad? His father is good. Okay, so you can see his father because we're talking about John's dad, not my dad. All right, next one is pronunciation of the simple past. Now, this is quite annoying. I lived in Barcelona for 3 years. I lived. Now, we don't pronounce the ed. Okay, in Spanish, you generally pronounce all of the letters in a word. However, verbs in the simple past have the ed pronounced as t in English. So, lived, not lived. And there is only one exception, really. Any word that ends in a T sound, any verb that ends in a T sound, such as decide or want, okay, then we reintroduce the ed, okay, decided, wanted, okay. So don't forget that, because what sometimes my students do is they learn that they need to pronounce the simple past with T, so they say walked, talked. I'm like, oh, very good. But then when they want to say something in the past with want, they'll just say want. I want, yesterday I want some coffee. And then you say, it's wanted. Because they then forget to reintroduce the ed with these verbs that end in the T sound. So once you learn one way, don't forget that it works two ways, okay? Ed when the verb ends in a T sound, but all the other sounds, it's t, okay? Liked, walked, okay? Unless, of course, the verb is irregular, and then the verb has its own pronunciation, like run or ran. All right, next one. This is a common mistake. Actually and currently, this actually is often confused because it is a false friend. So actualmente is a false friend in English. Actually means de hecho or de verdad. Okay, so don't confuse it. Students often want to say currently or at the moment. Okay, because they get confused. They actualmente estoy trabajando aquí. Okay, so currently I'm working here. You don't say actually I'm working here. Okay. Let's look at forgetting the S in the third person singular. This is one of my pet hates. Why? Bueno, she like to eat cake. Or he live in Barcelona. Why is this a problem? Well, you know, there's not much of an excuse for this. What I tell my students is, in Spanish, you make everyone transform every single verb tense, every single subject. So yo tengo, tú tienes. Like, you have to change every single verb. Otherwise, it doesn't work. In English, we just ask you to be aware of one small change in the verb with he, she, or it. And for the love of God, people do not do it. Okay. Remember, in English, whenever we use a verb in the present simple, okay, an affirmative, we say he speaks, she talks. Okay, you can't say he talk, he speak. Okay, so she likes to eat cake and he lives in Barcelona. Okay, please don't forget the S. It's a bit annoying. Okay, all right, let's look at the next one. Confusing to stay with to be. Now this is a bit confusing for me too. I don't understand this. All right, where are you? I stay at the bank. And why this happens? Well, personally, from my experience, for some reason, I think Spanish speakers confuse the verb estar with the English verb es. They say esté because for some reason, whenever there's an S, Spanish speakers introduce an E. But the verb is actually stay, not esté. But in the minds of Spanish speakers, some people go, estar, esté. Estar, esté. And then they start using stay instead of to be because of this confusion with the pronunciation. I don't know why. But I think it has something to do with that. Remember, estar is the verb to be, de toda la vida. And quedar is the verb to stay. The problem is that sometimes it works. For example, you can say, I was at home this weekend, or I stayed at home this weekend. That works. So this is where the problem, I think, comes from as well. Sometimes stay will work, but in most situations, it sounds weird. Okay? So let's look at using double negatives. Now, I didn't see nobody. This makes you sound like you went to a really bad school when they didn't teach you any grammar. Okay? Because in Australia, people who say, I didn't see nobody, are the type of kid that probably was a terrible student and was a bully and was the one that beat you at school. So, if you double negate in English, it doesn't work and it sounds like you had a bad education. Okay, so I didn't see nobody is not correct. Why? Well, as I just said, we can't double negate. In English, you can negate twice in a sentence. You can say, no vi nadie. Okay, no and nadie are both negatives. In English, that doesn't work. It's forbidden. You need to use anything, anyone, anybody, anywhere, okay, after these sentences. So you would say, I didn't see anybody, not I didn't see nobody. We use anybody, no, anybody, anyone, anywhere, anything. We use that after a negative, okay? So we don't double negate. All right, and what's the next one? The next one is for versus during. This is a common mistake too, okay? So I have lived here during 2 years. All right, that doesn't work, okay? Why? Well, in Spanish, during and for are durante. Isn't that nice? The same word in Spanish is 2 words in English. Or 1 word in Spanish is 2 words in English. Okay, so in English we only use during when we say when. So when that something happens or happened. During my holidays, when my holidays, I read a lot. Okay, durante mis vacaciones leí mucho. But when we use for, we need to use a time expression after it. So I was on holiday for 2 weeks. Okay, 2 weeks is a time expression. 3 days, 5 days, 2 minutes, whatever. Okay, so for goes with a time expression, and during is when we say when. Okay, so that's it, my friends. That is the 15 common mistakes in English that people make. That now completes my list of 30. All right, so you really need to work on those, and you need to work on improving your English to make sure that you don't make these mistakes, because you know most of them are quite annoying and they can be fixed easily if you're aware of them. A lot of them maybe you're making and they've become, you know, like internalized in your brain. You really need to try and be aware of them. If you do know that you're making these types of mistakes, then what you can do is just try and work on fixing one at a time. Okay, and it should take you just maybe a month or two, because sometimes these things are really, you know, embedded in your psyche. So you need to just work on them, be aware of them, understand the reason why, and then you'll start to improve and not make these annoying, silly mistakes that typically people make. Okay, well, that's it from me, people. Head over to the AOBE website and you will see all of these on the website. You'll also have the YouTube video, which I'm going to upload, and you've got the podcast on through Stitcher or Spotify or iTunes. And that's it. Also, grab a copy of my ebook, 500 Business English Collocations for everyday use. It's an exhaustive list. It's a great number there. And you've also got example sentences to put things into context. And there's also a bonus, okay? So if you guys want to download that, grab a copy, and also have a look at the bonus that's on the download page. Well, that's it for me, people. I am off. I've got lots of work to do, as always. I hope you have a great week. Hope you're having a great week, and I look forward to having you on the Art of Business English next week. Take care. Bye for now.